All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're diving into a topic that honestly has more layers than a Pride Parade cake.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely agree with that.
Stereotypes about LGBTQ plus relationships.
And you can trust me, there are way more misconceptions out there than flavors in that cake.
I love that. Okay, so our roadmap for this deep dive is an
The
episode.
roadmap, I like it.
Yeah, it's an episode called Breaking Stereotypes in LGBTQ plus relationships from a podcast called Dating in Color. And what we really want to do today is give you the knowledge you need to spot these stereotypes.
Yeah.
And then totally dismantle them.
You know, it's like you're getting those cheat codes to just bypass all that societal programming about what love should look like, you know?
Yeah, forget the rule book, we're writing our own.
Exactly.
All right, so let's just get right to it. Why are these stereotypes so damaging?
You know, I used to think that it was just about feeling misrepresented, being forced to wear an outfit that just doesn't fit right. But it really goes deeper than that. These stereotypes are actually tools that are used to maintain power structures that benefit certain groups.
Okay, now that's something I hadn't really thought about before. Could you explain that a bit more for me?
Yeah, so think about it this way. If you can just paint a whole community as other or less than, it becomes much easier to justify denying them rights or opportunities.
Right.
Stereotypes then become a way to control the narrative and limit people's potential.
Wow, that's actually kind of heavy. It's these stereotypes aren't just annoying, they're actually harmful.
Exactly. And they play into some of the deepest anxieties that a lot of LGBTQ plus people face. There's this constant pressure to prove that their relationships are valid and that their love is just as real and worthy as anyone else's.
It's that whole who's the man and who's the woman in the relationship thing, right?
Yes.
Every couple needs to fit into these strict roles.
Exactly. It's love is some kind of transaction where someone has to be dominant and someone's submissive. And that question just erases the incredible diversity of LGBTQ plus relationships. You know, all the unique ways that people can navigate power dynamics or intimacy.
Right. It's assuming every heterosexual couple is straight out of a 1950s sitcom.
Right.
With the breadwinner husband and the housewife who just takes care of the kids in the house.
Exactly.
It's just not reality.
Not at all. And it feeds into another one of those really damaging myths that LGBTQ plus relationships are all about.
Yeah.
Fleeting passion and just sex.
Yeah, we're not capable of deep emotional connections or anything.
It reduces the richness of these relationships, you know, the shared values, the intellectual connection, and yes, even the mundane joys of building a life together.
It's assuming that all straight couples only care about having babies.
Right.
And never experience those butterfly in your stomach moments or the deep comfort of knowing that someone really gets you. It's absurd.
Totally.
Yeah.
And just as harmful is the stereotype that LGBTQ plus folks are just allergic to commitment.
Oh, yeah.
Monogamy is just not in our DNA.
Oh, I've definitely heard that one.
Yeah.
We're all just constantly on the prowl for the next best thing.
As if monogamy is the only valid way to express commitment.
Right.
It ignores the fact that LGBTQ plus people are just as diverse in our relationship styles as anyone else.
Of course.
Some of us crave monogamy, some of us thrive in polyamorous relationships, and some of us find fulfillment in models that just defy all traditional labels.
Yeah, it's all about finding what works for you and your partner or partners and having the freedom to define commitment on your own terms.
I love that.
And speaking of defying labels, the Dating in Color episode really drove this point home with some really powerful stories. They featured this lesbian couple who constantly get hit with questions about when they're adopting.
Oh, yeah, as if that's the only way to build a family. What's so fascinating about that story is how it just highlights those subtle ways that these stereotypes are just baked into our language and assumptions.
Yeah.
It's not always super obvious discrimination. It's those seemingly harmless questions that actually reinforce a very narrow view of what a family should be.
It's people are subconsciously saying, well, you're two women, so you must be missing that motherly instinct. So adoption is your only option.
Right, exactly. And it's amazing how this couple just flipped the script.
Yeah.
They talked about how they're building their own definition of family on their own terms, and maybe that doesn't include children at all.
And that's totally valid.
And that's perfectly valid.
It's about taking back the narrative and saying, hey, our love is real.
Yeah.
Our commitment is deep, and we get to decide what our future looks like.
Absolutely. It's about challenging those external pressures, but also dismantling that internalized homophobia that makes a lot of LGBTQ plus individuals question their own desires and choices.
It's like some of us are still trying to fit into this box that society created for us, even when it's suffocating.
Exactly. So before we go any further with these stories, let's just take a pause for a second. What's resonating with you so far? Have you ever encountered these stereotypes? Maybe even unknowingly perpetuated them.
Yeah. Take a moment to really think about that, because we all have biases, and it's important to be aware of how they might be influencing our understanding of LGBTQ plus relationships.
And if some of this is making you feel a little uncomfortable, that's okay.
Yeah.
Growth often starts with a little discomfort.
It's in those moments of discomfort that we can start to break down these harmful stereotypes and create a world where love is celebrated in all its beautiful, messy, non-conforming glory.
Well said. Now, are you ready to hear about some more of those inspiring stories from the Dating in Color episode?
You bet. Hit me with them.
All right. Okay, so one of the stories that really stood out to me was about this couple who are like embracing fluid roles in their relationship.
Well, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so it's like they're throwing out the rule book and making their own playbook, you know?
I like it.
They talked about how they consciously swap responsibilities, like one week one person handles the finances and the next week the other one does.
Oh, wow.
And they make it a point to like share household tasks equally, and decisions are always made collaboratively.
It's like they're really actively trying to dismantle those expectations of who should be doing what.
Exactly. And the cool thing is that they're not doing it out of obligation or anything.
Right.
They're choosing to do it because it works for them.
Yeah.
You know, they found that this dynamic allows both of them to feel more fulfilled, both individually and as a couple.
That's awesome. It's like they're creating a relationship that's truly equitable, where both partners can bring their full selves to the table.
And it's not just about practical stuff like chores or finances. This fluidity extends to their emotional dynamic, too.
Oh, interesting.
They talked about how they're both comfortable being vulnerable with each other, offering support and comfort when needed.
That's so great. It makes me think about how much pressure society puts on men, especially, to just be stoic and not show their emotions.
Absolutely. And those expectations can be so damaging, not just for the individual, but for their relationships, too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. Like bottling up your feelings is never going to lead to a healthy partnership.
Not at all. And speaking of healthy partnerships, the episode also touched upon families with LGBTQ plus parents.
Okay.
It's a topic that sadly still faces so much prejudice and just wrong information.
It's kind of crazy, right? Like this idea that somehow LGBTQ plus people are unfit to be parents.
Yeah, it's this deeply ingrained bias that often hides behind concern for the children.
Right, right.
But honestly, tons of studies have shown that kids raised by LGBTQ plus parents are just as well-adjusted, happy, and successful as their peers who are raised in heterosexual households.
Yeah, the key ingredient is love and a supportive environment, not the gender or sexual orientation of the parent.
Exactly. And Dating in Color featured this gay couple who talked about their experience raising 2 adopted children.
Okay.
And they were open about the challenges they've faced, but also the just like immense joy and love they feel as parents.
I can imagine that going through the adoption system as a same-sex couple probably comes with its own unique set of obstacles.
Definitely. And this couple was very open about the discrimination they faced, both from individuals and from the system itself.
Wow.
But what really struck me was their resilience, you know, like their determination to create a loving family for their kids no matter what obstacles they encounter.
That's amazing. It's like they're saying, we're not going to let bigotry and narrow-mindedness define our family.
Exactly. And their story is just one example of countless LGBTQ plus families who are thriving all over the world.
That's great, too.
They're breaking down barriers and challenging the very definition of what a family can be.
Yeah, it's about time we move past these outdated ideas and embrace the beautiful diversity of families in all their forms.
I totally agree. And you know, speaking of diversity, the episode also touched upon a topic that I think often gets swept under the rug.
Oh, what's that?
Couples who are exploring non-traditional commitment styles.
You mean like open relationships or polyamory?
Exactly. It's important to acknowledge that commitment can look different for different people. For some, it means monogamy. For others, it might mean having multiple partners.
Right.
And for others, it might mean something completely different.
So the key is that everyone involved is on the same page and comfortable with whatever that looks like.
Absolutely. Honesty, transparency, and clear communication are crucial in any relationship, but especially those that challenge traditional norms.
And that's something that Dating in Color really highlighted. They featured a couple who practice ethical non-monogamy.
Oh, yeah.
And they talked about how important it is to have those open and honest conversations about boundaries expectations and needs.
It's about getting rid of the shame and stigma that often surrounds non-monogamy and creating a space where people can explore these relationships with integrity and respect.
It's like we're expanding the definition of what a successful relationship can look like. You know,
I like that.
it's not about fitting into a box that's already been made for you. It's about creating something that works for you and your partner or partners.
Exactly. And that actually brings up a really important point. Even within the LGBTQ plus community, there can be differing views on these non-traditional relationship models.
That makes sense. It's a huge and diverse community, just like any other.
Yeah,
So there's bound to be a spectrum of opinions and experiences.
absolutely. And it's important to approach those differences with respect and understanding.
So we've talked about how these stereotypes are harmful, and we've explored some really inspiring stories of people defying them. But I'm curious, what can our listener do in their everyday life to challenge these stereotypes?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It's one thing to understand it all, but how do we actually put it into practice?
Right, like what can we actually do?
Well, I think it all starts with something pretty simple, actually, just being mindful of the language we use.
Oh, you mean like avoiding those super awkward questions like who wears the pants in the relationship?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of just assuming things about people's roles or dynamics based on how they look, approach every couple with curiosity and respect. Ask open-ended questions like, how did you two meet? Or what's your favorite thing about spending time together?
Right.
Just simple things like that can go a long way in breaking down those stereotypes.
It's about like acknowledging their partnership without trying to force them into a category.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just language, too. It's about being aware of our own biases.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We all have them. It's part of being human, but it's our job to examine those biases and really understand how they might be affecting how we see things.
So like if you find yourself making assumptions about someone's relationship, just hit that pause button in your brain and ask yourself, where is this coming from? Is this based on facts or just what society has told me?
I love that. And don't be afraid to ask questions either.
Right.
Respectfully, of course. Most people are usually happy to share their experiences and help others understand their perspective.
It's all about creating that space for open dialogue and connection.
Totally. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just be a vocal ally.
You mean speaking up if you hear someone telling a homophobic joke or spreading misinformation?
Exactly. Challenge those harmful ideas, even if it feels a little uncomfortable. Stand up for the rights of LGBTQ plus individuals and couples, not just during Pride Month, but all the time.
Yeah, it's about giving them a platform, sharing their stories, and advocating for equality and acceptance in every area of life.
And remember, allyship is a journey, not a destination. It takes constant self-reflection, education, and a willingness to keep learning and growing.
It's about showing up for the LGBTQ plus community in ways big and small, consistently and authentically.
Something that often gets overlooked is that breaking down these stereotypes actually helps everyone, not just the LGBTQ plus community.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about it. When we let go of all these strict societal rules about gender roles and relationship structures and family models, it makes more room for everyone to express themselves authentically
I see what you mean.
and build relationships that are truly fulfilling.
It's like we're opening up so many more possibilities for what love and commitment can look like.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. Every interaction, every conversation is a chance to challenge those harmful stereotypes and help build a more inclusive and loving world.
That's a really good point. It's not just about learning, it's about taking action.
Absolutely. Because knowledge is power, but action is where real change happens.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, everyone, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive into breaking stereotypes in LGBTQ plus relationships.
It's been a really great conversation.
Remember, dismantling these harmful narratives is something we need to keep working on, and we all have a part to play. So keep having those conversations, challenge those assumptions, and never forget how powerful your voice can be.
Yeah, until next time, keep diving deep and keep spreading that love and understanding that you're all